Good evening. Good evening. We'll be starting in about 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. All right, there we go. Thank you all for coming out this evening. My name is Cedric McCrae, and I am the director of the Tampa CRAs. This evening, we are having a community engagement meeting related to the commercial grants policy updates that are being proposed and that the CRA board will be making some decisions on here within the next month. But it was requested that we have a additional engagement session to better educate and have a conversation with the community at large and business owners related to the commercial grants updates. You know, the purpose of the policy updates is essentially to improve various components. We've had those programs going for about a year, and there were some questions, there were some concerns, and staff working with our community redevelopment agency board, or essentially city council, if and or when they're wearing that hat. So we've come up with some proposed changes, and we just wanted to go through those with you all this evening. And we will go through a presentation for about the first 25 minutes, and then we will take questions after the presentation. And I'm going to acknowledge a few folks that are here. And I'll start to my immediate left, Ms. Mitchell, who is a member of our grants team. I have Mr. Eric Cotton. And it is, don't tell me, Tammy Villafarte. Forte, yes. And she's with Construction Services. And then I have Mr. Noel Quinones. Yes. To Mr. Quinones' right, we have our CRA board attorney, Attorney Cliff Shepard. We have Ms. Dee Reed, who is our supervisor for our commercial grants team. We have Ms. Rosshaven, who works with Ms. Reed. And then last, for the supervisor that handles our special projects and all the big money items, Ms. Melissa Martinez. To her right, we have Ms. Katrina House, who is a member of our grants team. And in the back, we have Ms. Brenda Thrower. To her right is Courtney Orr. They're both, Ms. Orr is the manager for the Urban Core CRAs, so that's Downtown, Channel District, Tampa Heights, and Central Park. Ms. Orr is the CRA manager for West Tampa, as well as Ybor City 1 and 2. And then last but not least, unless I'm missing someone, we have Ms. B. Parks, who facilitates our housing programs for the Tampa CRA. And then I believe we had a CRA board member that came in, and there she is. I couldn't see you back there. Board member Hertex.
Also, we have Darlene here as well.
Yes, and Miss Darlene Johnson representing the District 5 office. Thank you so very much for being here. So with that being said, do we have any community advisory committee members that are here from any of the CACs within the Tampa CRAs? All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for being here and attending with us this evening. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Ms. Reed and we're going to start the presentation. And before I forget, if you have any specific questions, just please hold them until the conclusion of the presentation. And we have a parking lot over there in the back corner that those ladies are going to facilitate. So they have Post-it notes. If you have a specific question you'd like answered, they will walk around and hand you a Post-it note, and then we'll tack it onto the board and then come back to it at the conclusion of the presentation. Is that fair?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
It's residential.
It's okay. Just go.
All right, good evening. We're going to kick off the presentation with the commercial grants division. As Mr. McCray said, I'm Dee Reed, the Economic Development Coordinator. Here with me from my team, I have Andrea Rosshaven, Katrina House, and Tiffany Mitchell. We appreciate you all coming out to learn or get a better understanding of the proposed revisions to the policy and grants. So one of the concerns that was expressed was that staff did not provide a side-by-side rendition of the current policy as it's worded, and then the ability to see exactly what is changing. So that is what we've done here with this presentation. You will notice that on the left side, it lists the current information, things, how it's worded today. And then on the right side, which is in our blue bubble, would show what's proposed. And so we've taken the time to also change the font color and bold the language that is going to be changing or that we are proposing to change with the update. So as you can see here, the titles of the guideline documents are listed here. On the left-hand side, these are the documents as they're titled under the current policy. On the right-hand side, these are the titles that are proposed. The changes include renaming the policy document. So you'll notice that in our gold font, it says grants and funding policy. We're removing the two levels for the pre-development grant, and it will be combined to just create one comprehensive grant. And then we're adding funding request guidelines to the list of funding options. So as we get into the details of the revisions, there's 4 key points that we would like for you to keep in mind as you're reviewing these revisions. 1, these revisions are solely related to the commercial funding and not residential. 2, CRAs shall not fund new construction unless it's infrastructure and affordable housing. 3, multifamily is a residential use, thus is ineligible for commercial funding. And lastly, new mixed-use developments are still eligible for residential funding. You'll see here in the left bubble, it contains current language regarding the principles the CRA uses to guide its funding decisions, while the right bubble contains the proposed language. So what's changing here? We have taken the text that's here in the parentheses where it says the act. We're simply specifying that anytime you see the terms the act listed in the policy, it refers to the Florida's Community Redevelopment Act of 1969. And then here in the last sentence, and I see that a portion of that is locked. Is there any way we can shift that? But what that section does, it incorporates language specifying that funds would not be awarded for new construction unless it's affordable housing. And this is to align our policy with the official legal opinion that we received on August 6th and became effective immediately. Yeah, stop it. You need to change it. Okay. All right, so we understand that these revisions can be a little confusing and bring up a lot of questions about what would and would not be eligible for funding. It raised those same questions for staff as well. As you can see from these first sets of examples, the types of projects that would qualify for funding are those that are restoring, renovating, repairing, and converting existing structures. Projects that would be ineligible for funding are those where new structures are being constructed, whether unattached or attached to an existing structure. I want to clarify that in the residential portion of the mixed-use structure that we use in the first example of ineligible projects, if proposed for affordable housing, would still be eligible for CRA residential funding. However, remember that tonight we're here discussing the commercial funding only. Residential improvements of any kind are not eligible for commercial funding. Next slide. So under the current policy bubble here, it lists the process currently outlined for requests of $1 million plus. In the proposed policy section, the acceptance of requests for funding are capped at $1 million for non-City of Tampa requests and $5 million for City of Tampa requests. New slide. Next slide. What this means is staff will not accept any applications that are requesting $1 million plus. In addition to limiting city requests to $5 million, we are limiting their award to 25% of the overall project cost up to the $5 million cap. We're limiting the improvements that will be funded. We're implementing a timeline for submission of their requests to allow a fiscal year to build those funds into the budget. And we're maintaining the requirement for CAC recommendation and board approval of the project concept. And then again, CAC recommendation and board approval of the award. The intent of these revisions are to encourage funding of $1 million plus to be used for implementing CRA initiated projects that accomplishes the goals outlined within the district's CRPs. Next slide. So seeing the two versions of the policy wording regarding direct and progress payments, you'll see that the only revisions being proposed officially identifies legacy relief as the version of legacy credit that applies to special projects and funding requests. And it allows for monthly payments to the contractor instead of making them wait until the end of the project to receive any additional funds after the initial deposit. Next slide. So here, we've described a scenario to show the difference in how these payments would be issued under the two policies. So in our scenario, Shelley's total project costs are $125,000 and she's utilizing legacy credit. She's been awarded grants utilizing legacy credit has been awarded grants totaling $100,000 to be used towards eligible improvements under her contract with We Build It Contractors. Since We Loan It Bank has approved Shelley for a $25,000 loan and staff has approved their billing management process, she was also approved for direct contractor payments. So under the current policy, the contractor would receive his deposit and have to wait until the project completion. The awardee has paid their portion of the project costs for which they are responsible and submittal of the certificate of completion in order to receive the remainder of the grant award. Under the proposed revisions, the contractor will receive his deposit as well as monthly payments from the CRA up to the last 15% of the award amount. Once the project is complete and the awardee has paid their portion and they submitted the certificate of completion, the contractor will receive the final 15% of the award.
So one of the exciting changes being proposed by staff is to expand the legacy credit impact for the long-term commercial property owners. Oh, next slide, I'm sorry. Oh, you got it, okay. There. All right, thanks. All right. Legacy credit helps owners reduce the match amount needed to qualify for a maximum grant award. This credit is currently capped at the amount of the TIF revenue paid by the owner on that property. Over the last year, as we implemented the grants, we discovered that in the most cases, the TIF credit was significantly less than expected and therefore did not have the impact intended. The proposed revision would remove the TIF cap and let the legacy credit only be determined by the years of ownership. We are also clarifying how legacy ownership reduces the owner match for special projects grants and funding requests. The total maximum lifetime legacy credit for a qualifying property will remain at $100,000. Next slide. All right, so how does this change impact the grant applicants? So let's use this example of a 25-year-old property owner. Shane has owned his commercial property for 25 years. He has paid a total of $3,306 into the TIF due to depressed property values. After evaluation of his proposed scope of service of work, the eligible improvements total $50,000. Although he would qualify for a maximum legacy credit based on the years of ownership, under the current policy, capping the credit at the TIF contribution, Shane still has a considerable match requirement because his legacy credit amount is so low. Next slide. So under the proposed policy, using only the years of ownership to determine the legacy credit amount, the legacy credit has the intended impact by reducing his match to $0. This allows Shane to complete his $50,000 property improvement and be entirely repaid with CRA grant funds. Next slide. Some of the proposed policy revisions are clarifications to avoid confusion by adding definitions for commercial use and mixed use as they are intended to apply. Ensuring consistent standards across all the grants prohibiting reimbursements for sweat equity. Establishing parameters for reimbursing soft costs under the special projects grants and funding requests. Limiting tax-exempt properties to exterior improvements only, and specifying CAC members are ineligible for CRA grants because of the city's ethics policy. We had previously presented that CAC members were ineligible to apply for special projects, grant, and funding requests, but recently learned that the restriction applies to all CRA grants. Next slide. Clarifying additional revisions are clarifying that property owners are required to attend the mandatory pre-application meeting and that those meetings expire after 1 year or upon the effective date of a policy update. Adding the ability for special project and funding request applicants to apply for and obtain permits following their pre-application meeting, but before getting their official award letter or executing their grant or funding agreement. The restriction on starting any actual project work before a formal award would still apply. Reclassifying the top funding tier for just CRA and city projects and condensing the remaining tier funding levels. Expanding the requirement for grant agreements and restrictive covenants to all grant awards, not just those over $25,000. Revising the process to consider City of Tampa funding requests, and outlining details for the appeals process. Next slide. In addition to policy changes, there are also proposed revisions to the individual grants. Many of these changes are the result of guidance from the CRA attorney to ensure the CRA is in compliance with allowed CRA expenditures outlined in the Florida statute. The proposed changes to the pre-development grant will combine the scope of services for level 1 for the design concepts and level 2 for the constructible plans into a single grant offering. We'll establish a timeline after the design is complete that the project must begin construction, ensuring that the plans remain constructible and don't just sit on the shelf getting dusty. Incorporate a repayment requirement for projects that are ultimately not constructed to help provide the maximum impact for the community. update the contracting requirements and documents for the grant, and updating the scoring matrix to reflect the grant changes and allow for additional point opportunities to qualify for the grant. For the commercial exterior grant, HVAC will be removed as an eligible improvement. Art installations will be added as an eligible reimbursable improvement. And the scoring matrix contains additional point opportunities to qualify for the grant. Next slide. Probably the biggest proposed change is to the commercial interior grant. Eligible improvements for this grant will be limited to only improvements that resolve City of Tampa code violations and necessary upgrades to meet fire, electrical, plumbing, accessibility, and structural code requirements. This will typically include properties that have been damaged by fire or flood and have compromised integrity due to impacts by vehicles or trees. These are not improvements for aesthetics, efficiency, functionality, technology, or maintenance. Next slide. Examples of eligible items would be code required improvements to upgrade an outdated electrical box, creating an ADA accessible restroom, or next slide, or other necessary upgrades of fire, electrical, and plumbing systems required by the city to meet building code requirements for the structure and site, not solely for the operation of a specific business at the property. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. There we go. Example of ineligible improvements would be cabinets, standard bathroom fixtures, mirrors, decorative lighting. Next slide. HVAC systems, countertops, ceiling tiles, furniture, appliances, and improvements for specific business use, such as a commercial kitchen range hood. Next slide. One more. For the special projects grants, proposed updates include processes requested by the CRA board, which include limiting grant requests to under $1 million per project, making all city requests ineligible for grants and instead processing them as funding requests. This three-step grant approval process still requires a CAC recommendations and approval by the CRA board, regardless of the dollar amount requested. The total amount awarded remains limited to the amount budgeted annually. No CRA area can budget more than 10% of their total area budget, up to a maximum of $1 million annually for this grant. So now I'll turn it over to Melissa Martinez with the CRA's Project Management Division.
Thank you. Hey. Can you guys hear me? Good? Is this good? Okay. Good evening. My name is Melissa Martinez. I am the Senior Project Supervisor for the Tampa CRA. My division is responsible for site preparation, planning, project management for CRA initiated projects, arts projects requests in the CRA district, and what we're going to be talking today is processing funding requests. Thank you. So currently on the left side, you see the current, what is our current policy on non-city requests that are greater than 500,000. All city requests comes through my division. We have, all of them are reimbursable grant unless they're approved for direct payment. 50% match is a requirement. For any project that is $1 million or more, there's an RFP that is a waiver requested and required. And then you see highlighted, this is the last one, is the one that is going to have some changes. The ineligible applicant properties, which is bar, lounges, clubs, or restaurants deriving more than 50% of their income from the sales of alcohol. So what we're proposing to either add or update on the policy will be to have non-city grants approved for, the cap is $1 million. The city, so the cap's gonna be $1 million for non-city requests. City requests will be up to $5 million. The non-city requests may require a 50% match. This will just depend on if they qualify for the legacy relief. There is a new concept, which is the pre-application concept approval, which means that the applicant would have to first go to the CAC, made the presentation of a concept of what they're proposing and planning on requesting funding for. The CAC will then have to make a recommendation to the CRA board. The CRA board then will hear what the concept design is and make an approval for them to then come back, the applicant, and apply for the grant. And this is on city projects. And then there's a 20% of the total grant, up to $200,000 may be allocated for the eligible pre-development costs. That's something new. Next, please. But I wanted to also, I've received some questions when we have come to the CACs to bring projects or applications, and the questions are usually, how do you guys derive or bring us this request? So I wanted to go over a little bit of how their application process is. Currently, the pre-application meeting is required. This new slide, the blue portion of it, of this presentation, is what we are adding or requesting to be added as is a new, which will mean the pre-application concept. Once that approval comes around, and then the applicant would submit a formal application, the CRA staff then review the documents, and using the forms that you see on the right side are the wording, the award making process. Those are the questions that we asked to make sure that an applicant is eligible for the grant, which is how do they comply with the Chapter 163? How do they comply with the goals of the CRA? How do they comply with the community redevelopment plan? That's form that you see on the right side. And we present that with the memo to the CAC for recommendation. One is recommended, then we present it to the CRA board for approval. And the step is pretty much the applicant will go present the CAC, the application, and our recommendation, and then from there it goes to the CRA board for the final approval. The next step, which will be the next slide. Next. We'll get there. Okay. The next steps on this funding request is once the CRA board approves the request, then we work on the funding agreement. And that is between the applicant, sometimes their attorney, and our CRA attorney. We pretty much have a template that we will send either for the non-city funding or for the city funding request. Once both sides have agreed to what the funding agreement is going to look like, then it goes to the CRA. The non-city will go to the CRA board for approval and execution. And for the city request, we'll go to the CRA board, and then we'll have to go to the mayor for signature and execution. Once you have the executed contract, one of the articles of that contract is what we call condition precedents. These are items that need to be submitted before any construction can start. There's a list here of what we usually require. It's just depending, it's pretty much tailored to the project or the request, what may be needed. And then once that is approved, you receive a letter from our CRA director stating that you can go ahead and start construction. And after that, we just monitor and we process the disbursement request according to the funding agreement. Next. So funding inventory revision is grants approved for 1 million plus are converted to funding request. The city of Tampa is going to be eligible up to $5 million. We have this new concept of the CAC and board approval of concept. And this is only applies to city projects. And then the CAC recommendation of board approval for the award of the request. And the award required board approval and a program change for funding. So these are some key reminders. This revision are solely for commercial funding, not residential. CRAs shall not fund new construction unless it's infrastructure or affordable housing. Multifamilies are residential use, thus ineligible for commercial funding, and new mixed-use developments are still eligible for residential funding. And I think we're going to our last slide. Okay. And for any contact, we are putting here in the information the same that we put it on your presentation. You can still request for consultation. We have on our website a button that you can select and request online. You can also call us. Phone numbers there. And I think we're going to open now for questions. Thank you.
Do you want people to go there, or are you gonna read the questions that people are writing down? Just a couple things, we've got about 3 questions that we've collected back here. 2 are commercial, there's 1 that's for residential. Are we gonna have everyone just come to the podium? So we're gonna do, or do you wanna take these right now?
You can
Take these right now. Okay, beautiful. If you have a sticky and it's commercial, okay, we're talking tonight, hand it up, I'll get them. Anyone else? Okay, there's 4 questions. So far. Here.
So if you have any questions that you want to come to the mic, you can go ahead and ask, come up as we review these.
Good evening, Keela McCaskill. My first question is on one of the pages you referenced city projects. From my understanding, I guess this is for the attorney Cliff, can they do a city project with CRA dollars?
Yes.
I mean, can you require funding of a city project with CRA
Okay.
dollars?
Yes, the answer is yes. The cities are not ineligible for projects with CRA dollars, but they have to be CRA eligible projects under the statute. So that's the answer. I wouldn't be able to answer the question like, is it usual or normal? I don't know that. I haven't seen it a lot, but there's no disqualifying reason under the statute that a city couldn't be an applicant.
So, legacy credit owner, 40, 50 years, will not be allowed to do development because it exceeds $1 million. And it's not, they own it, they want to develop it. They don't want the city to be a part of their development, but they would like their funding because they are developing in the city within a CRA. But it's not quote unquote a city project. I just want to clarify that if they want $5 million like you've done previously, can they not apply for the $5 million because of the new proposed changes?
To the extent I understand the limits, which are not by statute, but are by the program, the folks who run the program, the answer is yes, that is correct. But for just so there's a clear understanding, my role is to say whether the statute allows the expenditure or doesn't allow. So you ask, for example, can the city be an applicant? And there's nothing in the statute that would preclude the city from being an applicant as long as what they want to spend the funds are on are legal expenditures and not things that are forbidden. But in terms of the amounts, for example, I have a grant program out of the city of Apopka that the limits for facades is $30,000 as an example. I didn't make it up. The policymakers made that up in terms of the number. So that I don't have any control over. But to your point, if I understand the question, yes, those are the proposed limits.
So if they have a project that exceeds $1 million, statute does not say they cannot.
It's not a statutory thing.
That's question 1. Question 2 is on page 16, where it has a pre-development and then it has a special projects grant. And then it's very confusing still, because it then talks about it goes to a funding request. Can somebody walk me through what that looks like? The project is over $1 million. They want to use pre-development and special projects grants. And then because of a certain dollar amount, it flips to, my understanding, it flips to a funding request because it exceeds that dollar amount. Walk us through that to see what I can't process that based on those words that was on the presentation.
Okay, so the first thing I want to specify is that this is not changing with the proposed revisions. You cannot stack special projects grants with any other grant. So you cannot utilize special projects and the pre-development grant. What you are able to do is apply for a special project, and there is a portion of that award that can be allocated to be reimbursed for pre-development services. So your soft costs, your engineering fees, your architecture fees. So that's the first question. Then the second question is, in terms of applying for a special project, you cannot apply for or request more than $1 million. However, the board has the authority to approve more than 1 million if they so choose. Because there is a CBA agreement, if you get awarded for more than $1 million, your project then becomes a funding request because there are additional steps that it has to follow because you're receiving more than $1 million. So that's why it transitions to a funding request and is managed by Melissa's group, because those are the types of projects they are already following that process.
No further questions. Thank you.
Okay.
So, hey, how you guys doing? So the removing HVAC from eligible improvements, but adding art installation, I don't understand that.
Can you repeat the first part?
What good is an art installation if you can't have AC inside the commercial building?
Okay. So before we answer your question, can you state your name for the record, please?
My name is Jason Rickmans.
Okay, so the HVAC thing has been one that we went by all the CRA board members to discuss with them. It would be very limited if you were to have a program that allowed HVAC, very limited. And an example of one where it'd be potentially okay is a building is completely destroyed from a standpoint of being gutted. The structure may be there, but all the services like the utilities and so forth are gone. That qualifies as a repair or rehabilitation, and that is something that's specifically recognized under the statute. And under those very unusual circumstances, you might be able to justify HVAC. But what's typical instead is somebody has a unit and they want a more efficient unit. That's an upgrade in the CRA world. That's not a CRA expense. Again, remembering that what CRAs are supposed to do is eliminate slum and blight, a lot of which is based on what people can actually see. And so if you go through an area that looks like it's slum or blighted, and by the way, there are many areas around the state which you could drive through and not recognize you're in a CRA because the statute is very broad in its application of that term, those terms. But nevertheless, the idea is you're improving what people see. So when they drive through the area, they feel safer. It looks more attractive. If windows are broken, they're fixed. If doors are falling apart, they're fixed. If there are bars on the windows, they're removed so it looks like a safer area. Community policing is provided through whatever innovations that the police department comes up with in conversations with and in collaboration with the CRA to do things like maybe it'll be cops on bikes. Or I don't know. Point is, that's the idea, to make an environment in which the businesses that you want, we're now talking about commercial stuff, want to be in the area. It's an area they feel like if they're there, they're okay. People will come to their businesses and they will succeed. So that's the goal. So how does that figure into HVAC? Well, HVAC is not visual. However, if you have a building that's burned out completely, that's an eyesore. And so you got to fix it in order to make it operable, as opposed to I have a 10,000 BTU unit and I need a 12,000 BTU unit. That's an upgrade, particularly if the 10,000 unit is BTU unit is working, then that's sort of going to be an owner expense. That's the reason. But then you said, but what about this art stuff? It's exterior. And as long as the government is not involved in selecting it, much like facades, paint colors, putting awnings or not, and things of that nature are visual, so that when you go through the area, it's more attractive. There's a way to justify that under the facade grants idea. That's the reason.
And so just to clarify, so it's not, you guys are not interested in paying for improvements,
It's not about interest. It's let me, this is probably a good baseline question to start this off. So not surprisingly, just before COVID, when people weren't really paying attention because we got other things to do, like try to survive, the legislature made a big change in 2019. And prior to 2019, the list of things that you could spend CRA money on had specific language in it that said, including but not limited to. So it had a long list of stuff you could spend money on, but it also had the phrase including but not limited to. So, for example, prior to 2019, one of the things that CRAs routinely did around the state of Florida, much to the, it turns out, irritation of the legislature, was do marketing, right? I'd have, don't laugh, we had some cities say, well, can we run a rodeo with CRA dollars? And I couldn't tell them no, because at the time, there had been an opinion in 2010 from the AGO that said, it was weirdly worded, but it said, I cannot say that that's not okay because of the including but not limited language. In 2019, they took that language out. It's gone. And instead, in its place, and I'll read you, it's a very short paragraph. It says, effective October 1, 2019, monies in the Redevelopment Trust Fund may be expended for undertakings of a community redevelopment agency as described in the Community Redevelopment Plan only pursuant to an annual budget adopted by the Board of Commissioners of the Community Redevelopment Agency, and this is the critical word, and only for the purpose specified in paragraph C. I won't read them to you now, but suffice it to say that is the directive. So you have to go through what is okay under paragraph C, which also refers you to a different statute, 163-370, and letters A through O. And if you can't find a justification for the expenditure of TIF under any of those places, then the answer is no. Some of them have more flexibility than others. Others are really ironclad. There's like affordable housing. You can spend it on that. That's what you can spend it on for that particular thing. So that's sort of the reason why these things, they tightened it down substantially. But again, and I think the room is pretty aware of this, they're still not real happy, which is one of the reasons why they came very close last year, legislative session, to taking CRAs away effective as of this month. They were going to shut them all down. No more projects, no more money, no more nothing. And we have for those who don't know, I'm the general counsel for the Florida Redevelopment Association all over the state of Florida. In fact, we're all going to a session for them for the next 4 days starting tomorrow. And one of the things that the FRA provides is a lobbyist to fight these issues. And we literally fight them every legislative session. But last year was a special kind of threat because we'd never been threatened to be shut down before. There had been like this change in 2019 to kind of tighten the reins. But essentially, there are those in the legislature, frankly, who don't have a clue about how this stuff actually works, who think it's like the wild, wild west out there. So they see, like people tend to, they'll see one bad example or one city that's working as a bad actor, and then they blame everybody. And that's where this is coming from. So that's the issue. And one of the reasons we are now skewing so tightly to what the statute says is not only the word only, but because the penalty for violating it is we may not have CRAs at all. So.
Okay. Last question. What about existing projects already submitted? Are they going to still fall under the old rules, or I'm just kind of curious about that?
So if you have submitted an application
Yes.
prior to the cutoff date, which was September 10th,
Yes.
then if you submitted a complete application, then you fall under the current policy.
Okay.
We are no longer accepting applications under the current policy. So when the revisions are approved and go into effect, everything will go under the updated policy.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, Mark Siebenauer. My question just has to deal with timeline. I'm reading here that you need submission for next fiscal year, which would be 2026, by January 31st. And just want to understand, is that the beginning of the process by January 31st, or is that the ending of your submission process that you're waiting for approval?
So that requirement only applies to city requests. So if the city is planning a sidewalk installation project, we're asking that they come to the CRA with their concept at the concept level, and they are to submit those requests in January, which gives staff, your CRA manager, to coordinate with the CACs and build that funding into their budget. But again, that is specific for city requests.
Okay. Thank you for the clarity there. The next part still deals with timeline, and that is understanding, in your experience, when a person starts the process, what's the expectation to finally get approval or denial on the end? Is this a 6-month process? Is this, if you're looking for 2026, you're probably out of luck. It's going to take a whole year to go through the whole process, or what?
Anybody else? You want to answer?
Well, it depends what you're talking about. Are you asking about a standard grant, an interior exterior grant, or are you talking about special projects?
Standard grant.
Standard grant, usually after we get a complete application, usually within like 60 days, you'll have an executed grant agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I was just going to piggyback. Could you?
Can you please state your name for the
Kevin Johnson. Just piggybacking off of that, could you provide the timelines for all of the, like the ones you just mentioned?
I can tell you about for the funding request. It can take. I'm still working on some of the funding requests. It's been a year or less than a year since the CRA board actually gave the approval, and just because they still have not committed commitments when it comes to do the funding agreement, then the applicant has some issues or some commitments that they need to be able to put on the funding agreement. So that timeline can switch from, I mean, when we receive the applications, we have 10 days to go ahead and review it and provide you some comments if there's any comments, and then from there we schedule when the CRA board is available, when the CEC, the next meeting is available. So that can move you from 1 month to 2 months depending on what's already on the agenda. So it's very hard to pinpoint exactly like a timeline for all this because it's just depending on each grant works differently.
And I'll just add on to that. I think that one is less likely to affect most of the people in this room because again, the funding requests are for city projects. Mm-hmm. The only projects that would eventually go into funding requests that are not city projects are projects in which they've requested under $1 million, but the board would have approved an additional funds. So you've essentially gotten to, I would say, a tentative decision still within the timeline of special projects. And I'll let Andrea speak to special projects timeline a little bit better. But that only extends if you get awarded over $1 million and then you go into the funding request. And then there's steps that may add additional time. But to go ahead and cover
for special projects, which is the under $1 million one. Again, you have to, once you get an application and within 10 days, we'll give you feedback on whether it's complete, if there's anything we need fixed. So once we have a complete application, then it goes to the staff review. It goes through a quick legal review. It's scheduled for a community advisory committee meeting. And then after that, it's going to get scheduled for the CRA board. So all of those timelines depend on where you fall. In some cases, you have to meet agenda deadlines. So I would expect ballpark 6 months would be your expectation on that because you're going to have to get scheduled in time to get a CAC meeting. Sometimes, like if you apply and there's no meeting the next month, then you're going to get pushed the next month. Things like that.
And if I could say also that when we have the pre-application meetings, we try to give you kind of like an idea of if you apply today, this is when it will go to the CAC, this is when it will go to the CRA, to kind of give you a timeline. We provide that as part of the minutes when we meet.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lanice Germany, Livio's Catering Company.
Hi.
So I just want to kind of answer your question from a recipient perspective, because I do have to head out, but I was invited by the CRA. Livio's actually was a recent recipient under the current policy, and we were awarded interior and exterior for a restaurant project in the West Tampa district. So as far as first, let me just say, and they didn't pay me to say this, they didn't hire me to say this. But for me personally, my process through the CRA, because I actually started with Andrea, I would say late 2024. And I say that because they were about to undergo some additional adjustments to the current policy at that time. And so through conversation, I opted to wait until the current policy became whatever it currently is, right? So that was thing one that held up my process. But thing two, by the time we did get the updated version, which is now the current policy, from the minute that I actually gathered all of my information, which took a lot of time, especially from a small business perspective. And then you also have to be very careful with the vendors that you utilize, from your contractors to your everybody in the contract process, even the architectural designers. You have to be very selective with who you go through, and go through a thorough process, because if they don't give you all the information that you need, that too can hold up the entire application process. And I'm talking to y'all, but I'm facing this way, so I'm talking to everybody out here, honestly. But by the time we collected all of the information that we needed, because it was a lot of moving people, a lot of moving parts, from the minute that I submitted my application, there was some time of maybe a 30-45 day process where we went back and forth because my application wasn't complete. And then by the time I got it complete, I was at that 60 or so days. And from what, it was just a very communicative process. I worked with Celeste, and so anytime she needed anything from me, honestly, it's up to you to get it turned in. That's like critical, because even from the minute that you turn in a completed application, you're now on a clock, you're on a timeline. And so if your vendors are slowful, if you, the business owner, is slowful, because I'm also running a business, but also trying to get a CRA grant, all of those things could factor into your timeline. But from the minute that we finally got the award, and I say finally because what felt like a long time actually wasn't, it might have been a grand total, I would say about 4 months or so. By the time we got that, I got my award letter, and now we're on the clock for permitting. So everything is a clock. Everything is a clock. But again, it's important to have knowledgeable vendors. That is the most critical piece. You should not cut corners because of cost. I'm gonna say that. Yeah. So thanks.
Okay, I've heard enough. I've heard enough. This is still complex to the average person trying to go after some free money, basically, grant money. You got grant money, you got fund requests. Okay, if I'm on the CAC, I can't go after the money. But people that was before me could go after the money. Do I have to resign from the CAC board to make an application? Or does they deny approval of an application has me to resign? Which do I have to do? I have to resign to make an application? I don't think so. I think until the application is approved, then I got to resign. Because it says no CAC members can benefit from a grant. But it didn't say they couldn't benefit from a funding request. What that's about. So I'm here to say, look, when is you going to have the written change? These are all guidelines, by the way. The board can just throw these in the garbage can if Ms. Vertek and 4 people up there say so, if somebody go up there. So I want to see the written changes. This is nice overview, 40,000 foot level. We're over all this here change is great. Where is the written language that the board is going to approve? That's what I would want to see. Yeah. With all of these changes implemented. You know, the cross out, cross in like they had already. Now, I think there's been a few tweaking going on, but I want to see that so I, as a professional, can see exactly the words that are going to be done. This is just a PowerPoint. So when will we get that? I think, I don't know, I got a couple, 2-3 questions on them stickies, but when will we get that? My other question is, I'm looking at this PowerPoint that says no mixed use development, because I have property that's in a CRA that's in a commercial zone, but it's been a residential use for decades. So I'm not eligible unless I convert it to a business use. So commercial use. So I want to see, I haven't seen the definition of commercial use yet. We talked about it will be, and it says that you shall have one. I want to see the definition because I may want to challenge it because there is no real definition in the city code. My other question is you said there's no housing available. That's a housing program, it's B, but what about an Airbnb? They're not regulated by the city of Tampa. it's a residential use, but it's a business use too. So what is an Airbnb? The city has no regulation over it. Is it eligible for CRA funding in Airbnb? That's a question I don't think is going to get answered tonight. Then I'm flipping through here, and it says, hey, wait a minute. You just said you can't have any housing with a CRA commercial grant. But it says here that conversion of an existing single-family building into a medical office is an eligible activity. So if you take a single-family house and convert it into a commercial use, which I guess medical office is commercial use, I ain't seen the definition yet. Y'all got the definition here so we can see it in the public? Anybody? Do y'all have a legal definition of commercial use available tonight so us can review it and make a question on it? No. This is what I'm getting at, Ms. Hurtag. They ain't prepared for us tonight. I want to know what the commercial definition is. Next. So I'm saying conversion of existing single-family building in the medical use of commercial use is eligible. Is where I'm taking that because I got single-family houses. Let me move on. These are the easy ones. The other thing, CC members subject to city ethics policy or ineligible city. What about funding requests? Are they ineligible for that? Because funding requests is different than a grant request, is what I'm hearing tonight.
On slide 14.
Yeah, I'm on 14.
Okay, so,
I'm on 14.
oh, because of it, that particular section was talking about grants. It is special project grants and funding requests. It's all grants. It's all grants.
There's a funding requested grant.
Right. We had previously stated at the other meetings that CAC members were ineligible for special projects grants and funding requests. So the clarification, the difference between the previous presentation and now.
Okay, I'm a businessman, an engineer, and a professional. I want to see in writing the actual written policies, not this presentation of a PowerPoint. I want to see the language, the verbiage, because I may want to protest that.
Unfortunately, we cannot give you language that the board has not approved.
Yes, you can.
So
it's called a draft. It's called a draft copy that you go to the board. Anytime the city has stuff to go to the board, the public has a right to review it. So before the board approves it, we can say we don't agree with it. That's why we're here tonight, because you went to the board to get it approved, and the board says let the public speak because we haven't been heard. So I want to see the language before it goes to the board on at midnight at the last minute, and we don't have a chance to review it. Let me move on.
If I could just interrupt, Mr. Robinson. So the underlying strike through, I believe that's what you're referring to as a relation to policy updates.
That's what
will be provided. Will be provided in advance of the November 13th meeting. Yes, sir.
Now let's move on to.
It's actually available on the website from when it was uploaded and on base for the June meeting. So it is online.
But there's been changes tonight that was not in that. Okay, so there's some changes in that uploaded version that has been changed since the last time I heard this presentation. Okay, I don't trust the city with that.
That he's asked about, those definitions are in there. The only things that have changed were the things that where we found out that the CAC is ineligible
all right,
for
stop
all
right there. The only thing that changed. Okay, listen. Okay, get the complete document. Don't be sitting there telling me it's uploaded, but that's the only thing that changed. No, if it's uploaded, it's final. The board's gonna review it.
How about this? Can we get it done? Can we get the most updated copy up there by the beginning of November?
Yeah, they can do that. Now, move right along. The other thing on slide 15, since we don't have a reference, I hope y'all recording this meeting, right? Thank you, Jesus. I don't have to repeat this. Removing HVAC, I understand the technicality of being an HVAC person myself. However, updating the scoring matrix to add additional point opportunity. Where's the matrix at? I ain't seen no picture showing me the matrix. Okay, that's also on the uploaded thing. Why didn't that upload? We should have had the uploaded strikeout section and went over the strikeout section. Would have been better than this here PowerPoint. So where's the matrix? Okay, I don't see it tonight, but let's move on. I'm just saying, where the matrix? Y'all mentioning something, but you're not providing. This City of Tampa, is ineligible for grants, but they can submit a funding request, which is a grant. That's what I just heard, right? Because I actually was a funding request to grant. You said, yeah, but they're ineligible for grants. So which is it? Is a grant a funding request or not? Because you're saying the city is ineligible for grants. So if the funding request is a grant, how can the city be eligible?
For the special project grants or for any other grants that the commercial grant teams manage it. It's only eligible for funding requests. We changed the name because we have special projects funding requests and special project grants, and it was getting confusing. The language to have two that starts with special projects.
But
So
they're
we
all
decided
grants, right?
they're all grants.
All right, so why
They're
does
all
this statement
grants,
say
right.
that the city is eligible for grants, but then you on the other hand, you say the city can submit a funding request, which is a grant? Let me move
It's
on.
award money. It's not the funding requests are requests for funding. They're not technically a grant. The grants are the standard grants, and then you have your
So I
special
can make a
project.
funding request then. I don't have to. I can make a funding request, not extra
Funding
grant.
requests are only for city requests, as well as awards for standard projects that the board approves for greater than $1 million.
Listen, okay. Now, appeal process. What process we going to use? Are we going to use Florida Statute 125.53, Mr. Attorney? What appeal process? Who will be the persons reviewing the appeal? Hopefully not the people that approved it or denied it. Will it be a third party, a group of people that have nothing to do with this? Okay, because if you have people that are sitting here denying it at the same time reviewing the appeal, how's that going to work? That's not fair. You should have an independent
board.
Huh?
The appeals are made to the board, the CRA board.
So it will be a procedure. Is that in the updated version y'all got? But you make, is there any bonding required? Any type of a protest bond required?
It outlines what needs to be submitted to the board, and then that information would be placed on the board agenda.
Right, but there's no appeal bond. I want to get all this straight because I'm the type of person to appeal stuff. So there's no bond required to appeal, right? Okay. And then the appeal will follow what process? Rules of order? I mean, what attorney?
I will tell you what I expect to happen, but it's subject to change because it's a policy. It needs to meet basic due process, which means notice of your appellate rights, which I know is included in the grant information. And it would be then presented at a scheduled meeting of the CRA board. And if they follow due process, which I'm sure they've gotten advice on not only from me, but also from the city attorney, you would be given the opportunity to present your side of why you think the application was denied improperly, what basis it was on. The city staff would present the reasons why they think that it should be denied. And then the board would toss it around until they were ready to make the decision as to either uphold the denial or to grant some relief. It might be the amount requested. It might be some lesser amount. I don't know. But that's the general process.
And then if you are not satisfied with the board decision, then you go to circuit court.
Good luck with that, but yes.
Well, I know, but it's possible.
It's possible. It is highly unlikely to succeed. Grants as giveaways are, by definition, discretionary.
Got it. All right, that's all I got for now, but I got some questions on this.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Can I see a show of hands of any other folks? And I know that we have some questions that we need to get to that were submitted. And if we could, just with the considering our time, if we can have, if you have a question, please come up.
Hi, good evening. I'm Dr. Michelle Williams. I came to this country when I was 13 years old, moving here from Haiti. And I thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. And the more I lived here, and the more I grew up, and the more I gained the knowledge of how politics work here in the United States, I just seen the same thing that's happening all over this country. It's quite disturbing that I have this 4-page Tampa Community Redevelopment Agency East Tampa CRA FY 2025 budget to actual as of August the 31st, 2025 unaudited report. And I see a lot of discrepancies in this. I didn't go to school for accounting. I'm a medical doctor, a natural doctor, and holistic medicine physician. But I know 1 + 1 = 2. And this report is quite disturbing of all these zeros and all these numbers allocated to things that shouldn't be here. So my question this evening is, outside of this board and the department heads that do an internal audit, when was the last time that someone stripped the match to ask for a federal investigation of the East Tampa CRA board and its funding? That's my question. You don't have to answer it now. I'll just talk.
Hi, my name is Captain Brathwaite. I just had questions on the definition of the art installation. Would things functional be considered in that? Like, say I had like exterior signage that was being repaired, or say something a little bit more functional. Like I was going to, this is for the commercial exterior. I was gonna like pop a hole in the wall and basically make a service window. Like I don't 100% understand the definitions of art.
So if you were punching a hole in your building, you put a service window in, then that's a window and door, and that's an eligible improvement.
Okay.
If you were putting signage on the building, that's signage, and that's an eligible improvement.
Okay.
So neither of those would be considered art.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to, so it would be something like from an artist, I would then submit to the board, and then they would like approve over for like the art installation portion.
So if you were doing an art installation like a mural or something along those lines, there's a process outline for getting in the policy. There's a process outline for art installation approval. So we would talk about what you're planning to do at your pre-application meeting, and then we walk you through what that process looks like.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all.
Good evening, Sean Bear Whedon. Just a quick question, clarification. So are no grants or new construction is not eligible for any grants, or can special project grants still go to new construction?
So new construction is not eligible for commercial funding. According to the statute, CRA cannot fund new construction unless it's infrastructure or it's affordable housing. So because of the affordable housing piece, there is funding that would be considered through the residential funding. But as far as the commercial funds, we cannot put those funds towards new construction.
And not even a special projects grant?
Correct.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Allison Hewitt. Couple of questions, well, several questions. When you do a mixed use request and it's for a rehab, is that two separate applications?
It's one application per parcel. So if there's one building on the parcel, you submit one application. If the parcel contains two buildings, it's still one application per parcel.
But the commercial and the housing, is that if it's a mixed use development?
If you're requesting residential funds, then it would go through whatever the residential process is. I'm not aware of what that process.
But would that be two applications?
Yes. And Ms. Parks is here. That's part of the parking lot that I was describing earlier. If you have a specific housing question, she can respond to that.
Okay. And is it here clarified too that you have to show, I mean, as see here on the policy revisions for direct progress payments. So does that mean the policy of having to show that you're 100% financed to be able to be eligible for a grant, that is going to be removed?
That was never a part of the policy, that you had to show 100% financing.
Okay, but there were people who had a response when they applied that said you cannot show your financing, so you can't move forward.
That's right.
So
I don't know about that. I know that's not a part of the policy, You have to be able to, if you're doing a reimbursement grant, you would have to pay and be reimbursed. But under the direct contractor payment, you are only responsible for showing the portion that you have to pay. If the CRA is going to pay directly to the contractor, that amount, whatever that award amount, would be subtracted from the project cost that you have to show that you have the funding for.
And you have to show that during the application process, or show that where in the process that you have
It
that
would
funding?
need to be during the application process because we need to know that the project can be funded. What we don't want to do is approve an award, a contractor gets started, and then they receive CRA funds, and then they're on the hook for funds that have to come from the applicant. So we need to ensure that the project can be paid for before you can apply or be awarded.
And the prior policy did state that a pre-approval letter can be awarded to them so they can take to the bank. And the banks, because we locally have been working with 2 banks to get lines of credit. So is that still in here? Is that removed to be able to get that you've gone through the process? Here's your pre-approval. You can take that to the bank, and the bank can then give you a line of credit based on your approval.
What it is called a conditional award letter, and that is remaining in the process. However, we have to also know that the lending agency has given a preliminary or some type of approval for the rest of the project too. So for example, we were having some conversation with a lending agency, and we were talking about how that works. So if, let's just say, and I'll just throw out some numbers, if it's $100,000 project, and if the CRA is going to fund 50,000, if the bank is saying that we've met with this applicant, they are a candidate that can be approved for the additional 50,000, and there's a process that has to take place to get to that point. But then you will get a conditional letter that says contingent on that approval, you receiving final approval from that lending agency that you would be awarded for that 50,000.
So what does the applicant need to say in the application or provide in the application to get to the point where they get a conditional approval letter?
All of that would be flushed out during the pre-application meeting. You would have to let us know that you have a lending agency when we start to talk to you about how are you going to fund the project. When you put on their budget, your budget amount, you would let us know that there's a lending agency that is applying or that's going to give you a loan, and let us know that you're requesting direct contractor payment. And then there would need to be communication with the CRA and that lending agency so that we understand their billing management process, because that is also a component.
So that needs to be clear for those businesses who are not here and part of this conversations, and our businesses who are just saying we're going to, or heard about it, going to apply for the grant. You can put them many months behind if they don't know that they need to go to the bank first. So part of this needs to flush out to say you need to have a conversation with the bank. Now, understanding our businesses are having challenges right now, so unless they have the preliminary award, they're not going to get approval because they just have not created that banking relationship. But they do want to bring their building up to code and make sure that they're removing slum and blight. The next one is the question. There was a question about site control on a couple other applications. Is that clearly defined in the new process of what site control is and what has to be provided for site control?
I was gonna say the application, the policy says that the owner of the property has to participate in the pre-application meeting and give permission for anybody else to make a application, which means that site control is you own the property.
Yes, but when the owner has been at the meeting, there has been questions about site control, and so there was additional information that was required for site control, and I was wondering if this is now fleshed out to be able to define what site control because when you go to the meeting and you have the rep there and you have the owner reps sign and notarize, that has not been enough. So I want to make sure that that doesn't happen to another applicant on what the definition of site control is. That goes beyond having the owner saying we want to participate and sign authorization form.
Say the only 2 people who can apply for a grant are the owner and a tenant with the owner's permission. So there's an executed lease or it's the owner. I mean, that's basically the two conditions under which the policy allows you to apply.
Executed lease or executed purchase agreement?
Executed lease, because the purchase agreement will be changing ownership.
Yes.
So you need to switch ownership to be the owner before you can apply for the grant.
But the owner wants to make sure that they're going through this process to be able to sell it. So they're not leasing, but they have a purchase agreement. And so
It's not
we're waiting for clarification for that, and there's no.
You have to own.
You either own it or you lease, or you're
You have
leased.
to own the
You have an executed lease, one of the two things.
Okay, but the owner was there
But
I don't know.
to participate. So I just wanted to make sure.
So I have a couple of examples, and one of them is that the owner is there. The owner doesn't want any part of the grant. They were in the meeting just because there was a request for the grant. But the minute that we say you are on it too, they don't want to have anything to it because, oh no, we're selling it in a few months. That's not owning. The applicant then is really not owning the property. You just bring the owner because you're planning on purchasing the property. Well, that's not owning the property.
No,
And that's why we're trying to say the owner has to be the
so
one.
site
applying.
control, a purchase agreement is less impactful than the lease agreement. So they should just come in with lease agreements. So that's what the new definition of site control will be in the policy.
I think what needs to be understood is that the whole purpose of the owner being a part of the process, the owner, even though the grant may be going to a tenant, the owner is responsible. So if that tenant defaults, so let's say, for example, we paint the building, and I'm just using this as an example. Someone comes in 2 years and they repaint the building, the owner is responsible for reimbursing the CRA for those funds. So the owner has to be a part of that process and needs to understand, even though your tenant may be applying and getting this award, if there's a default, that responsibility falls on the owner. So if there's no owner, if you have a owner saying, I don't want any parts of this, they're no longer willing to take responsibility of that grant agreement that they have to execute.
I understand, but if you have the owner who says yes, and this is our authorized, this is we're signing on the application, that we still get we're not approved because we're not showing site control, because the site control we showed
So in
was a
that
purchase
case
agreement.
that you're proposing, then the grant goes to that owner that says yes. So then whoever is the applicant that is actually doing the work to get it paid, gonna have to figure out that. Because the grant will go to that owner, because it's the owner that wants
And
to get it.
I'm not asking who the grant goes to, I'm just asking that the definition of site control is clear and non-questioning as we're moving forward, because there are folks who will go forward and just have a contract to buy the land.
Yeah, let me try. Okay, so first of all, option contracts is what you're talking about. Happens all the time. What happens is a developer typically comes in and says, I'm interested in this property. I'd like to know what's possible. Can I get it rezoned? Can I get the comp plan changed? This is what I want to do. Multifamily. This is what I want to do. Commercial, whatever it is. You don't own the property. Yeah, but I've got the owner over here who signed a power of attorney or some authorization to allow me to come and make application. And that may or may not be good enough depending on the jurisdiction. The reason it's a problem is because if we actually make changes to the uses that are available to the property, expanding them or contracting them, and then the deal falls through, the owner's left with a property that's different than what he had, and he or she did not sell the property. So it is critical in every case that the owner, if the property hasn't already changed hands, be a part of the process. In the case of these grants, it's even more critical. And here's why. Because there's a 5-year window. She mentioned painting the building. So after 2 years, the tenant has painted the building with a grant and then has gone out of business and disappeared. And the new tenant, if the owner wants to get some, wants different paint. They're willing to pay for it on their own or whatever. But now, based on the way the grant is structured, 3 years of money is owed. So if it was a $50,000 paint job, they would be in their end of year 2. They don't owe 50, but they do owe 30, meaning 10,000 for each year that's left. And the owner has to pay that money. And that's why it's critical that the owner sign the paperwork accepting that responsibility. It's not that they're just saying it's okay. It's that they are taking on that risk through whomever, a contract purchaser a tenant or whomever it is. That's the critical factor here. So in terms of what is site control, it is essentially that whoever has ownership also carries the responsibility. And the only way that will change is if after the grant is done and the owner has now completed the sale and is out, now it falls 100% on the party who applied for the grant, and they would be responsible going forward. But they'd also be subject, if they didn't pay it back, to liens against that property. That's how it works.
Yes, so with site control, you can have site control with a option to purchase land.
As long as the owner is signing off on literally everything.
Okay. And I would just encourage that site control, since it came up as an issue, is included in the policies. So when you say going to the stacking of the grants, so if you have a funding request, am I clear when you said in the funding request, you can do soft costs?
A portion of the grant or the funding request could be allocated for soft costs. But keep in mind, you cannot apply for funding requests. You can only apply for a grant. It only becomes a funding request if the board approves greater than $1 million.
Okay, so when I come in and it's a $2 million funding request, so I just come in with
You cannot come in and apply for $2 million.
Okay, then how do I apply for $2 million?
You cannot apply for $2 million.
Okay, so, but how do I get a $2 million request for the board?
You cannot apply for $2 million. The cap is $1 million. You request, if you're coming in and you're requesting less than $1 million, then we can accept an application from you. What I'm saying is, in whatever circumstances the board decides that they want to fund more than $1 million, at that point the project becomes a funding request and is subject to the requirements under funding.
So how does the board know it's more than $1 million if I don't put the application in?
That's the point. You're not to apply for more than $1 million. You can only apply for less than $1 million.
I think that what she wants to know. So what you want to know is that the board's going to receive the information of your funding. So they'll see if they decide that, okay, they're going to know that if you're coming here with a funding or a project and we are just recommending 500,000, they might say, you know, this is $5 million. Maybe we want to give them $2 million. Do we have that available? That might be a scenario that it may happen, but
okay, so that means
but you're not requesting directly, like we're not processing an application for $2 million. That would be something that the board has the right to take a look and say,
so then the community members who are having development projects have to go directly to the CRA board to request that, and then they submit it to you?
No. The only people that can apply for a funding request or apply for funding greater than $1 million is the city of Tampa. The city of Tampa can apply for up to $5 million. That's it. Non-city of Tampa applicants can only apply for less than $1 million for any one project.
But if the CRA board, city of CRA board, could they waive the rules and accept the application over $1 million?
That's a board question. Could they do it? They would be undermining their own policy, but they would have the authority because they're ultimately the board.
Well, they've undermined the policy for the last three.
I'm not a politician. I'm just telling you how it works.
The CRA, they're over $1 million. You know, 8, 9, and 5, and 7. So now that we've got those big projects out of the way, we have folks who are trying to get some housing done. We can't apply for over $1 million. Okay, one other last one is
Ms. Hewitt, I'm gonna ask because we have a few other people and we roughly have about 10 minutes before we sunset.
Y'all gonna get to those 3 questions?
We're gonna try and lighten the round. So
good evening, Edward Felder.
As expediently as possible, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you. First question is, if I have multiple sites I want to develop, and I understand we have new terms where we have to apply, can I apply for multiple grants at one time, or do I have to wait and listen to each one, or do I have to wait to the next period? That's the first question. And also, I'm interested in larger projects. So I'm gonna have site control over 20, 40, and 100 unit, 200 unit sites. So that was my interest in coming and giving back to the city of Tampa. So with me looking at some of those larger development plots we already have under contract, should I just not do them or go someplace else to another city, or am I not going to be applicable? Because
When you say units, are you talking about residential units?
Residential units.
So
Yeah.
again, this is strictly commercial.
Okay.
Residential funding has a completely different process, and that's not a part, none of what we're talking about tonight
Okay, so I can
applies
still
to
look
the
at larger
residential.
projects, and that's
Correct. The residential team is going to, I'm not sure when they have their own process.
Okay.
And you'd have to ask that question with the residential
All right.
team.
Thank you.
But to answer your first question, or was that relevant?
No, that's relevant because I do have
Okay.
multiple projects we're looking at.
So if you have multiple commercial properties, you can submit more than one application as long as they're on different parcels. And you can submit them at the same time. You don't have to wait. However, there is a maximum, is it three? You can do three within within a fiscal year. So you can only do three at one time. Then you would have to wait until the next fiscal year to do any additional.
And to be clarified, when you say develop, these are vacant properties and you want to build new construction on them, you cannot use commercial grant funding for new construction.
Okay, gotcha. So that's residential.
Only for, well, if you want to do affordable housing, you can talk to the housing team about their ability of grants and their process. But if you want to build new construction, it can't be for commercial.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
And good evening, Keith Grimminger. On page 14, the funding principle, bullet number 3, establishing parameters for allocating a portion of the special project funding grant awarded to soft costs and specify them as reimbursement only. What are those parameters? And to what is the portion? And the question is, this is self-funded until you get those reimbursements, correct?
So it's 20%, up to 20% of the total grant award can be allocated towards professional service soft costs, which are architectural and engineering fees. And again, as reimbursement only. So yes, we will not direct pay an architectural fee. We will not, pay it up front to a contractor. It's as a reimbursement only.
Those are the parameters for the 20%. And then lastly, on page 16, you talk about the pre-development grant, incorporating a repayment requirement for projects that are not constructed. Is there a timeline on that not constructed? 2 years, 3 years, 5 years?
2 years. 2 years.
2 years.
Either start construction from 2 years from the design is done, either start construction, get permit within 2 years, or come into the CRA and apply for construction grants. So if they say they've got their storefront redone, right? They had building, they wanted to redo a storefront. They come in for a pre-development grant. We hook them up with the architect. They get designed, they get signed and sealed plans for construction. Then they have 2 years to either start the work on their own or come in and apply for a grant, like a commercial exterior grant, to get funding assistance with the actual build out. So one of those two things must happen. They must either get a permit or they must get a grant.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to the next one, I'm going to try to pick off some of the questions that came from the audience. When will these changes take place and when will they be retroactive? If so, what date will be used?
So as far as now, we don't have a definitive date because the board it's up to the decision of when the board votes to approve. What staff is proposing is for them to be effective January 1st.
Will it be retroactive?
No, no, there wouldn't be retroactive. You would not be able to submit an application until after they are effective.
But there's not any new applications being accepted under the old plan.
That application that's been approved.
Okay.
If it's been approved and they've been awarded, they're done.
Any other application is now no longer an application. application. So take it off the list.
Thank you. Next question. Can we get an example of what a city request is and what a non-city request is?
So a city request will be right now we have one for the temporary walk extension. The building department for West Tampa came in and requested and was approved. Are you okay? You okay? River walk extension. You okay? You okay?
Riverwalk shows me up.
That will be a city request. So mobility department came in and went through the same process. They have to fill out an application. They have to submit all the paperwork. Same thing as and then a non-city request will be the private sector. A developer that are going to come in and then request for funding for commercial property.
Well, East has CRA, except East has CRA.
Okay, next question. Why are mixed-use multifamily no longer eligible when missing middle are struggling with rent?
So mixed use, we're not saying is not eligible. The commercial space of a mixed use building, if it's being rehabbed, renovated, is eligible for commercial funding. The commercial fundings cannot fund any of the residential portion and cannot fund any new construction. But it does not, we're not saying that mixed use is ineligible. We're just, again, the commercial funds can only be used on the commercial space if it is being rehabbed, remodeled, converted. It just cannot be new construction.
Thank you. Next question. How will the lending agencies be validated? Are lending agencies required to be banks, credit unions, etc.? Could it be a private guy who lends money?
That's a good question.
That is a policy question. I will quickly tell you that my answer, if I was asked for this advice, I would not volunteer it, but I would say that should not be accepted. What you would typically see in this space is an irrevocable letter of credit, for example, in the name of the applicant, or an established credit line for X amount. And we had one example of a $125,000 project, of which 100 was funded through a grant, 25 was to be funded by the applicant. That 25 could be letter of credit, could be a line of credit, could be we've actually made the loan and put the money in the bank and here's proof. Could be a number of different things, but typically grandpa owes me the money or we'll pay it. That's typically not going to work, but that is not my call. That's a policy decision.
Thank you. Sean Bear Whedon again, follow-up question. If a property, an infill property has fire damage and has since been demoed, essentially, down to the slab, would that be considered new construction to rebuild from there?
Yes. And it's an interesting thing because I want to just quickly talk. If the building was destroyed and the city, and you came to the CRA and asked for a grant, can you do the demolition and clear the property? That's something that is permissible. I don't know whether we have a specific grant for it, but under the statute, that's one of the things that we can expend funds on. It's specifically spelled out in there. But in terms of if you have already done all of that work and now say, I'm now going to build a building, no.
What if it was done by others? Property owners?
Again, if we take the application as it comes. So if it's already ready to be built on, was done by somebody else, and you're going to put up a new project, it's a new project. If, however, it's a standing project that's went through all kinds of stuff, and it's going to be, and these are the words from the statute, repair, renovation, that sort of stuff. And that's why there's a real focus on not being new. If it falls into the category, it can be fall into the category of repair and renovation. There's a specific part of the statute that says you can spend money on that stuff. And so knowing what you can do before it's done and have someone pay for it is a critical part of the development process for someone who's like in your shoes can, hey, am I better off buying the property with the wall standing and building on what's there, or am I better off flattening it and starting fresh? That's your call, but that does make a difference in what's eligible.
So if it still has walls, it could be considered renovation. If it still has walls, it could be considered renovation.
Could be.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And before Ms. McCaskill comes up, one of them has already been answered. When will the CRA board be adopting these changes, guidelines or policy? And we shared that it would be discussed during the November 13th CRA board meeting. When will the written changes be available for public view? And that will be the first week of November. And the items will be on the Tampa CRA website. Ms. McCaskill.
We just watched the Tampa Housing Authority tenant that received the funds for them when they don't, the tenant improvement TI dollars. And then they also was able to benefit from the CRA dollars. That applicant was, or that recipient was happy to say that when they were missing information, you all were you worked with them for them to provide the information that was missing. That individual just got to West Tampa. Long-standing citizen of 45 years paying taxes in this district. Apparently missed a document, missed some information, maybe put it on a form that you didn't like, whatever that may be. And we still have not received a good explanation as to why it was not. There was no STIPS letter, conditions letter. I know you all see me in a space advocate and real estate and bringing these applications to you. But my background is lending, AVP underwriter of one of the largest financial institutions in the United States. And you stop the process without giving them conditions or STIPs. Anytime you go to anybody for an application, they give you some kind of STIP or condition list. You all denied the application. 45 years paying your salary in this district, and they're denied. But a new applicant, because they were in the housing authority building, was able to walk through the process, and they said 45 to 60 days. That applicant worked with you and your staff for 2.5 years. Then they came to me and said, I can't seem to move my application forward. I have it 1.5 years, and I watch you submit a denial letter for simple stuff. Help me understand what you're going to do about it going forward, because there's nothing in there that tells them what they need to do in the event that they miss some information. There needs to be some very clear instructions as to what happens when they miss information. Now, I'm assuming that her application was denied because you didn't want to accept anymore, because you told me to turn it in on 9/10. We did before 9/11. We did that. You knew you weren't going to accept any more applications. So I guess I couldn't have received the conditions list, but that should have been communicated. So her application now, she has to wait until whenever City Council CRA feels like they're going to approve the new process, which is ridiculous. So I encourage you to put some information in this packet that will give them that, and give them people an opportunity to be able to find out on a conditions list, some kind of stipulation list. This needs to be provided within 5, 10, 15, whatever number of days. And I don't like, Shepherd, the tone when you say free money, because you're not.
I didn't say free money.
You said when it's the free money in the beginning. This isn't free money. These people have paid taxes in this district. So I just want to see that mindset not be there when it comes to these grant dollars.
That was not me.
The city's not giving them
I
anything.
never said free money.
Take back.
I did not.
You did. You said grant money. So I assume that's why the mindset is a little bit different. I just want you all to understand. Your salaries are paid because these people pay taxes, and they pay into the TIF fund. Moving forward, just knowing that these grants are not free money. These people are paying into the TIF for what they've already paid, and they're going to continue to pay TIF moving forward. Thank you.
So for the audience, I'd like to just kind of give you an overview of what the process actually is. When you come into or you submit a request through the form, or if you call the office, you are assigned to an EDS. Once the EDS has conversation with you, they're going to look up information on your property. They're going to check property taxes. I'm sorry, economic development specialist. So my title is economic development coordinator, and my team is composed of economic development specialists, and we refer to them as EDS. So your project or your inquiry at the time, we call them leads, would be assigned to an EDS. They're going to do some preliminary research. They're going to look up ownership. They're going to look up property taxes. They're going to do some, due diligence. They're also going to reach out to you and get an understanding of what it is you'd like to do on your property. At that point, you would have a pre-application meeting that is scheduled, in which it is explained to you that the owner, if you're not the owner must attend that meeting. In those meetings, we speak very detailed. We give you the floor to tell us everything that you know about your project that you would like to do. We also discuss with you each grant that your project is eligible for. We discuss in detail with you what you need to submit, when it needs to be submitted. Once you turn in your application, yes, as the young lady said earlier, it does start a clock. Namely, the clock starts on staff. Staff has 10 days to do a preliminary review of your application to get back with you and let you know, hey, your application is missing X, Y, and Z. At that point, is it 30, 60 days? You have 60 days to bring that application to a complete status, which means everything that is required to be submitted in order to get to an approval, you have 60 days to get that done. And we are working with you. There's an opportunity. You can call, you can email. If we don't hear from you, we're going to follow up with you every single week during those 60 days. We have had leads get frustrated because they're like, I'm still working on this. But from a staff standpoint, we do not want to allow you to let things fall through the cracks. So we are reaching out every week, touching bases with you. Is there anything that we can help you with? Or what are you missing? Is it something dealing with permitting or whatever it may be? Staff is reaching out to you weekly. Once we get to the 60-day, actually before, I think it's at 30-day mark, you're going to get a reminder that says you have 30 days to get this application to complete. Staff is doing everything they can to make sure that you get your application submitted in that 60-day period. So that is what happens and takes place in the process. Yes, as we were leading up to, and I'm just going to say that exception to that process has been with this policy update, there was a cutoff date that was provided. We sent numerous emails to every lead that we have been communicating with. They were all broken down into 4 categories. We had leads that had not had a pre-application meeting. We had leads who had a pre-application meeting. Then we had applicants who had submitted their application, were still within their first 10 days, so they had not been given a cutoff date, a date that you have to bring your application to completion. And then we had those who had received their cutoff date. All of those groups of people received separate instructions of what needed to be done, submitted by the cutoff date, which was September 10th. We also, in that communication, communicated to everyone and said, please do not wait until the last minute because we need to be able to have time to work with you to bring your application to completion. And we said, if you wait until the 10th or the 8th or any period within 5 days, that does not allow enough time for you to do what you may need to do to get in missing documents to bring your application to completion by the 10th. So I will say to everyone, staff is here. If you work with us and you do what we ask you to do, you will be successful. We have several people that have been successful under the current policy. So you just have to work with us. Let us help you, help us, help you.
That's commercial you talking about? Thank you, Ms. Reed.
Yes. Housing too. I can't speak for housing. I'm only over the commercial component.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good evening, Kimberly Simon. I actually have been on hold to apply for months for a mixed-use project. And now I come to this meeting and I'm being told that they're not eligible. So will applications that have been put on hold be eligible under the old rules?
Okay, so I'm going to reiterate, mixed use is not ineligible. The commercial portion of
I'm saying for new construction.
New construction, yes. No, we cannot, commercial funds.
I've been on hold since May.
Wouldn't have mattered. The law has been the same since 2019.
Okay, so that kind of leads to my second question. Where exactly in the statute does it prohibit new construction?
It doesn't say no new construction. What it says is what you can spend money on. And what I keep talking about in terms of where it becomes something that you can tie to repair or renovation is in, and I'll tell you exactly where it is because I brought the property here, brought it here so I could say.
Because I use AI frequently, and while we've been sitting here, I've been trying to find a section that prohibits new construction, and I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, but can you find one that says new construction is okay? You can't find that either because it doesn't say that. What it does say is that you can use it for carry out a program of voluntary or compulsory repair and rehabilitation of buildings and improvements, and that's all. The only other places where new construction is permitted for certain kinds of infrastructure, for example, infrastructure that supports a convention center and certain other things that support a convention center, like meeting rooms, corridors that connect the convention center to the hotel and so forth. And there's a specific section for that. But there is nothing here, zero, that says, here, you can spend it on new construction, but unless we're talking about, as it's been mentioned, affordable housing.
So I'm going to say it's a little bit of a, there's nothing that says that you can't, but there's nothing that says that you can't.
Oh, no, it says you can't because it says you can only spend it on this list. So, and I'll be happy to give you a copy. If it's not on there, which it's not, you can't spend it. That's the whole point.
So is there anything that leaves it up to, I don't know, the CRA boards?
It used to say including but not limited to. And that's what happened. The reason they tightened it down is because people saying, oh, well, I'll have a rodeo or I'll fill in the blank of all the other crazy stuff. And there was a lot of it. And that's why they tightened it down. And that's why they threatened to get rid of CRAs altogether last session. So when it says only, I didn't do this because we're really running up against it, but CRA funds are a trust fund. It says it right in the statute. All the money that's TIF is a trust fund. And if you understand trust funds, you can only spend them in accordance with the rules. And here they are.
Understood. You're saying that it's specifying what you can spend.
Correct.
And new construction is not in that specification.
It's not in there, except for certain things that I've mentioned, which, again, if they change rules, I'm all in favor of it because I'm not just speaking for Tampa now. I have to do this stuff for all over the state of Florida. And 4 days this week, I'll be giving the same information. I don't like the rules. I liked including but not limited to. They changed it, they being the legislature.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have a couple more questions. We did have some repeats. One is, how will financial interest in applicant owners or contractors be determined? How will financial interests in the applicant, owner, or contractors be determined?
Is that for the purpose of ethics?
Yes, I believe so.
You guys should know this, and I think you do. Your city has its own ethics code, way beyond Chapter 112, which is the ethics code that applies to public officials. It's tighter. It's tighter, as I'm made to understand, because of certain scandals that have happened here in the past. So they've been much tighter than would apply under 112, the ethic code for public officials. And as we have in the past, when someone's asked the question about, for example, the CAC members and grants, that gets run through the ethics department at the city, and then they opine on whether they believe the conduct would violate or not violate the city's ethics policy. So that's the answer.
There's a couple things I asked that didn't get answered tonight. One, when does a person have to resign in order to participate? Because on page, once again, 14, it says city number 7% exercise are ineligible for city grants. Okay, if you put in an application and you deny it, you're not eligible. But if you never put in an application, so does it mean you can't put in an application if you're sitting on the CSC board? It don't say that. It just says you're ineligible for the grant. It doesn't say that you can't put an application in. Then once you determine that, okay, I'm gonna get it, I resign. If I ain't gonna get it, I stay on it. So what is it? Yeah. That ain't been answered tonight. So I just want to make sure that's on the record. And the other thing is, Mr. Sterling, we know we're going to have the same thing that we just did tonight, which is great. I love it. But how?
Ms. Parks is going to close us out.
She ain't going to be sitting here getting the camera up at the house and us getting on camera.
Can I answer his questions first?
Go ahead.
So every grant has the list of what's eligible, how we determine whether a property or an applicant is eligible or not. So while we can't tell you, don't submit an application, but if you submit an application and we check and you're on the CAC, then your application would be denied because you're not eligible. So in order to be eligible, you cannot be a member of the CAC. Now, your question in terms of whether you should, if you resign, do you become eligible? I don't know ethically how that applies.
The question is really something that would have to be vetted through the city attorney's office. However, I will go out on a limb and tell you that resigning doesn't solve the problem. And it doesn't solve the problem because it's the conduct that they're trying to avoid. The idea that a sitting CAC member would apply for a grant and essentially cast their line in the water, and if I get a hit, then great, I'll quit whatever it is because I don't get paid for that thing anyway, but I'm going to get this. The whole idea is to avoid the appearance of impropriety, that maybe you were shown favoritism, all those things. Which would happen? Before you do the application. Well, if you resign before you do an application, then there would be no prohibition against you applying.
So a clarification for that. So we have on East Tampa CAC, the chair is also an employee of the CDC of Tampa, and they also have a seat on the board, and they can also apply for funding.
No, they cannot.
But they can apply for being team on the funding for the $9 million that was just approved.
So here's what I will clarify. If you remember when she did her presentation, when we first came around and presented to the CAC, as far as staff was aware, based on the information that we were given, that only applied to special projects and funding requests. We have since learned that it applies to all grants. So if someone applied before we knew that, we can't go back and fix it. But once we are made aware, we're telling the public, we're putting it in the policy, therefore it won't happen again.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How do we know what city-funded requests are in the pipeline? I can tell you that we have a project tracker that is presented to all of the CACs for those respective areas, and then they're also included in the CRA board packet. All of the applications and projects, even the leads for the commercial grants are all within those meeting packets every month.
Can we make it produce? You know, that's my question every meeting.
Ms. White, actually, we had a meeting last week just to discuss the graphics on the commercial grant speech. Yes, ma'am. So we're working on it. Thank you. And at this time, I'm just gonna, because I know there was some housing discussions, and I'm gonna call Ms. Parks up, and then we will close out.
Okay, so I didn't get the paper over here. Let me just walk. Hold on, give me one second, excuse me. Yeah, get him. I just want to preface and say, if you came in through the doors and got a survey that was at the door, that's the housing survey. So that begins my public comment, period. So you will see two things. I was able to print out some of the presentations tonight for you to review, but based off of that presentation, we're going to start the first public comment portion of it. So there's a survey that you take that is specific to the unit creation and conversion program, which is a developer subsidy, but it also has some other questions in there that you can answer so we can start collecting the feedback based off of the proposed project, proposed process that's going to be taking place, which is a formalized application period. Here, who here in the room attended the CRA board meeting last month? Okay, so you could see there that we presented a process and we collected information. Now, based off of that process, we then posted it online. The survey is active now. You should have received a copy. I made about 40 if you didn't. Here. This is the survey for housing. So all your comments, concerns, recommendations, put them in that survey. Okay, so I'll start reading all that information prior to the November 13th that I will have just the preliminary proposal of what was collected in that survey and also what we proposed, which is a formalized process. Through that process is where you can apply for my funding, which is I will release a notice of financial availability of the monies. Then it will be that application period. We'll have a 5-person committee. All of that information is in that survey where you can answer and add comments, open-ended questions. So that's the first part of it. Then in November 13th, when all this information is gathered and then we propose it to the board, you know, that's another public area to say, hey, just based off of what I read, what you posted online, you know, I'm suggesting X, Y, Z, just based off of your new proposal that you put together. I will then gather that info because I will then have another month after November 13th to then collect more public feedback. So that's how I'm going to engage. Okay. So I'm still deciding at that point during that November time, if I can fit in a public meeting. Okay. But until then, I'm going to make it my business to try to go to all of the CACs, communities. You want me to try to go to the neighborhood, organizations. I am team 1 right now, but I am getting some individuals already, you know, offered, and then I'm about to get another person. So, you know, just bear with me. But any questions I answer, I'm collecting feedback. I collected a ton of, feedback just based off of what I've seen, what you guys mentioned throughout this process that's already being incorporated into it. Okay. Now it's just vetting it out. Let's go present it, get more feedback during that process so I could put it in. So yes, we can apply for mixed use. You would just have to wait until my funding cycle opens to apply for mixed use. That's where you pitch your project. I have X amount of dollars, then you pitch your project at that time during that funding cycle. We're collecting feedback on whether we should have just one funding cycle for large scale projects versus one funding cycle for small scale projects. That small scale project, I'm looking for my property owners. That's my funding for the property owners who's looking to do these different type of projects. So again, that's what we're collecting feedback from. And it's open right now. The server is active. Another way you could find it is you go to our website, tampa.gov/CRAs, and it's right there. You'll see a button where it says housing presentation. View that first, because one of the questions of the survey is, did you view the housing presentation? And then the rest of the questions just kind of flow with that housing presentation. So that's where we'll start off. So, okay. All right, so for the residential first-time home buyers assistance program, will the CRA structure the lien such that a homeowner can refinance their loan to take advantage of a better rate? Yes, they could do that if they don't have, no cash out. It can't be a cash out refinance, but they will refinance and the city will be subordinate to that. And the city has their own subordination policy geared towards this that I can send out to whoever asks this question so you can read it. They already have that subordination. It said for affordable housing AMI, that includes up to 140%. Is this referencing if the projects are going to have up to 140% availability? I don't know. It's just a statement. All of our income goes up to 140. Questions like how was I thought it was just for commercial? No, I was just the parking lot was just for. I'm just reading off. Just a commercial. It is. It's all commercial. You put your housing. Can you put your housing information on that survey so I could collect what you're trying? So I could make it. Put that in that survey. Put that on that survey because that could be that small scale. No more.
Okay, so I just want everyone to leave with the expectation. What we heard tonight is that we will get the strike-through process by the beginning of November. We heard that the presentation that was given was on the CRA agenda review. Can we put that on the website? Yes. Okay, so we're going to have that on the website by next week. Hopefully this week. And then the presentation produced tonight, I asked that it be available. They said it will probably be Wednesday. So look on the CRA website for all of the information. If you have any other questions, you know where to reach out. But if you don't see it, you know how to find me.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
And she said the recording will also be on the website. The recording from tonight's meeting will be on the website as well. Yeah.
That's why all you beautiful faces.
Right.
I'm just glad to see them doing this. And I see you, Mr. Attorney, down there in West Palm Beach, man.
So before we close, I would just like to say thank you for everyone in attendance, for taking your time out to come here, listen, ask questions, and also would like to say thank you to the folks assembled at the head table here. And we greatly appreciate your assistance in answering these questions this evening and everyone that played a part. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
You can. See you on the Yes, absolutely. That's all of this that we can. Keep it.